Advantage, proficiencies, ability checks, all of these terms are going to be coming at you hot and heavy in Baldur's Gate 3. And maybe you've never played D&D, or you're a BG2 veteran, and all this is like reading Braille upside down in a cave, which I don't recommend. Well, in this video today, I'm going to break down all of these terms and concepts using the character creation screen so as not to spoil the game for you. We'll be talking about ability checks, skills, proficiencies, different weapon types, advantage and disadvantage, spells, cantrips, and then I'll close the video out by showing the difference between an action and a bonus action. The gameplay portion of the video is where your character spawns right after you create the character, so again, this will keep things spoiler free for you. Before we get started, make sure you check out my class overview videos linked in the upper right hand corner, and don't forget to check me out on Twitch, where I will be streaming both a solo and a co-op playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3. But let's get started here on my beginner's guide to D&D terms in Baldur's Gate 3. So loading into the game, we can take a look at our Bard character. Bards have access to tons of different skills and all sorts of things, so I feel like it's probably the easiest to show off in this video. And the first thing we're going to talk about are your abilities. Keep in mind, quick disclaimer up front, I am no D&D expert, so I'm going to try to explain these as best I can to break them down into their common denominators, or the easiest way to explain them. But our abilities are crucial because you'll be interacting with ability checks throughout the entirety of your game. They're probably the most important because they will influence other things within the stuff that we're about to talk about. So, take Bard, for example, and every single class will have a specific ability that it focuses on. Bard here focuses on charisma, and this will help us with our ability checks. I'm going to go ahead and press T, that locks the screen, and we can take a look at this. So ability check tests whether an action is successful. Based on a dice roll, your ability modifier, any bonuses, and the check's difficulty class. And I can see here that my charisma is 17, my base would be 15, but my race gives me +2, making it 17, equaling +3 ability checks, or +3 to ability checks for charisma. How this system really works is every 2 points over 10, you get a +1 to this. And I think that is not this exact equation, but that's roughly how it goes up to a point or down to a point. If I were to say go below 10, let's take a look. If I go below 10, -1. And if I'm just at 10, it's a 0. So this kind of shows you that 10 is that kind of average point. Anything below 10 is considered, not below average. I'm not very strong, -1. Everything above 10 in intervals of 2 gives you an additional bonus here. But let's go back to this ability check to talk a little bit about this. And let me kind of give you a way to frame this. So, we'll even use strength for this example because it's easy to do that. So let's say that I find a box and I have to push this box. Well, the game assigns a difficulty class to that. I'm going to press T again. That's going to lock this. And we can see a number that must be matched or exceeded to succeed. Rolling a 1 always fails. Rolling a 20 always succeeds. That's a natural failure and a natural crit. Basically, what the game's telling us, like, okay, if you want to push that box, I've got a number you've got to beat. So I'm going to roll a dice, and in D&D you roll a d20 for these ability checks, and you will physically roll this in Baldur's Gate 3. This isn't just like a behind the scenes thing that'll go on. You'll roll that dice, and let's say the difficulty class is 10, meaning I have to beat or exceed 10. I roll a 10, but I'm not very strong. My ability check says -1. Well, now I've rolled a 9. I fail the ability check. That is how ability checks essentially work in the game, and it is why your ability checks and scores are so important. You don't need to have max across all of your characters, but you do need to specialize in the ones that are going to work the most for you. Take charisma again, for example, for bards. Bards cast their spells off of their charisma. They have skills that are based off of their charisma. So charisma is absolutely crucial to them. Let's go ahead and take a look at maybe the wizard. Well, now it's intelligence because that's how they cast their spells. Or maybe we'll go to a fighter because it's strength because that's where they're going to do most of their damage. Or a rogue who uses dexterity. Which brings me to my last point when it comes to ability scores. If you're using a wizard, a warlock, a paladin, a cleric, a bard, a druid, anyone who has spells, it's important to note that some spells, we'll go to cleric and I'll go to customize. Some spells will have this little modifier right here that says concentration. Caster needs to focus on maintaining this spell. They can only cast one concentration spell at a time, and their concentration might be broken when they take damage. That's the important part. So every time you take damage, if you've cast a spell that has this concentration signifier, then you will do a concentration check. The concentration check is based off of your constitution. So you want to still have constitution on a casting class because yes, it gives you hit points, but it's also important to winning all of your concentration checks. Also, dexterity is important here because it gives you a passive to your armor class. Armor class is something that, think of it like a difficulty check. If you have 15 armor class, they have to beat or exceed it. That's just kind of a blanket example there. But also it affects your initiative. So the time in which you will go first in combat, it's absolutely crucial. So having a at least average dexterity is pretty important across the board. Now, jumping back to our bard, we've talked about our abilities. Let me click the ability screen. You can see everything right here. Now, abilities also govern skills. So if I'm going to go ahead and click strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, you can see all of the skills that they govern individually, right? And that's important because your skills are kind of like ability checks, but they get some modifiers. Let's click this skill screen. Here are all of our skills. I'm going to unclick these. And I have skills with proficiency. So what proficiency is, I'm going to hover over this, you get a 2 bonus. So a bonus added to attack rolls and ability checks if you are proficient with a weapon, tool, or skill. Let's take a look at history to show you what that means. So every single one of these skills will have an ability that it affixes to, right? As we saw over here. We'll click intelligence. We were looking at history. We get a +1 to history because we have a +1 to intelligence. Whatever your ability modifier is what applies then to the corresponding corresponding skill. So looking back then at our skill menu, let's look at history. And remember the past or the world and its people. The way skills work is that you use these skills to interact with the game world. Maybe you're talking to someone in conversation and they say something like, well, this all happened during the old war. Well, maybe you're now proficient in history. So you get to do a history check to see if you pass. And if you pass, you ask more questions about the old war, whatever it was. Being proficient in a skill adds this proficiency bonus to the skill. So now, rather than getting just a simple +1 that I have for my intelligence modifier over here, remember that +1? I'm going to go ahead and click it over here because it's easier to see. Now, since I've specialized in history, I now get that +2 to it. My proficiencies, as I call it. I get that +2 to history there, right? So it's easier for me to do history. Or you know what? Maybe I'm talking to someone and I don't know if they're lying. Well, you know, I have actual insight. So this allows me to detect whether or not they're lying. And maybe I pass, maybe I don't. Maybe I'm rummaging through a dungeon and you know what? I do an investigation roll. Analyze clues, solve mysteries to see if I can spot something because it shows me a little outline and it tells me to do an investigation roll. Whatever it is, these aren't necessarily like, oh, medicine, I'm going to heal myself. It's not like that. It's like I'm talking to someone and I try to diagnose what's going on. Or maybe I see just a random NPC coughing and I try to use it. Or medicine could be something when it comes to some form of herb or something like that. It's actually probably herbalism, not to get too far off base. But my point here is, might even be nature, to be honest. My point here is that these are not necessarily oh, okay, medicine's going to heal me. It's getting the skill to interact with things within the game. And it's why they're so important because they also color how your character plays. Do you want to be a bard that's kind of like Indiana Jones? Well, investigation, insight, and history would kind of make you a little bit of an anthropologist, right? So that kind of gives you that capability. Or maybe you want to be this bard that studies that used to study a lot of arcane stuff. So you have arcana, investigation, and maybe history plays into this. Or maybe you're a bard that does all sorts of subterfuge and skullduggery. So you have sleight of hand, stealth, and deception. These are what color the character that you play. And they're important to you and how you want to play. So you choose the ones that you want. But you also have skills that are inherited. So I'm going to go ahead and switch our class to Ranger, because I know that's how this works, and Mage Breaker. So I have inherited skills by my background. I've selected Soldier here. And I also have selected, I've inherited certain ones from, why isn't this doing this? Well, Arcana should be selected here. There we go. I had selected, that's why. So it's granted as a passive to me because of my kit as a ranger. So certain kits can give you actual skill passives that just, okay, you've got it. It's already there. You don't even need to specialize in it. It's just part of your character now. So I don't need to waste a proficiency point. You only get 3 proficiencies in this scenario right here. The Bard, for example, can actually expand their proficiencies down the road. Other classes can too, but at character creation, that's all you have to worry about. Now, proficiencies, like I said, this is different for armor. Let's go back to our Bard. Let's scroll to the bottom here and let's look at our class features. Class features are also very important because this shows us that we have the light armor proficiency. So armor proficiencies, you can wear all armor and use all weapons in the game, but armor proficiencies, wearing light armor will not impose disadvantage on your attack rolls. What the hell is that? So you have 2 different types of things, advantage and disadvantage. So basically, disadvantage, you roll 2 dice and you choose the lower of the 2. Advantage, you roll 2 dice and you choose the higher of the 2. Anytime you see the words advantage or disadvantage granted by a skill, a spell, a cantrip, or whatever, that is how they play out in the game. Obviously, you want advantage. You never want to be at a disadvantage. You want your enemies to be at a disadvantage. You never want them to be at an advantage. So, also, this gives you no penalties to your attack rolls, but it also allows you to cast spells with that armor. So, having an armor proficiency allows you to not be at a disadvantage and to cast spells, and it's pretty crucial. You also have weapon proficiencies, which, like simple weapon proficiency, allows you to pretty much use any and all simple weapons. So clubs, quarterstaves, slings, short swords I think are in that list, dagger I think is in that list, but basically really rudimentary weapons. You also get martial weapons, which are more complex weapons. Longsword, what's another one? Scimitar would be one. A bastard sword, which used to be called exotic. Exotic is gone. It's just simple and martial now. But sometimes you'll get proficiencies outside of those classifications so that you can kind of dip into them. Take, for example, here we get longsword proficiency, hand crossbow, rapier, short sword proficiency. So regardless of whether we have simple or martial, we can always use these weapons. And what this means is, with proficiency, you add your proficiency bonus to attack rolls with this weapon. That proficiency bonus is the 2 proficiency bonus, right? So you're getting that added in right to your ability or to your attack roll whenever you make it. Hey, I'm going to go make an attack roll. What's my strength? Well, that's a -1. That kind of sucks, right? Because we're using maybe a long sword. Well, I also get my +2 to proficiency bonus. I'm going to go ahead and attack with my sword and all sorts of other stuff. That is where that comes into effect. But you also lastly have, for proficiencies, your saving throws. So you add your proficiency bonus to dexterity saving throws or to charisma saving throws. Every class has different saving throws. This doesn't mean that when you take damage, oh, you know what, I opt to do this saving throw. No. Certain abilities will tell you, or certain spells, certain attacks, a trap, whatever it is, will say, hey, make a dexterity saving throw. Meaning I will look at my dex, which has a +2 to ability checks, and I will roll a die. And I will see whatever that die comes up with. Let's just say it comes up with 10. I get a +2 because I have a dexterity ability check that adds 2. But you know what? I have a proficiency in it. So I get my proficiency bonus, which is, remember, that other +2. This one right here. Added in to any time I do a dexterity saving throw. So now that 10 became a 2 to now a 14. It's a very nice ability. You can also, I don't think I have any charm on here or anything like that. Sometimes this will tell you, here we go. So, magically charm a person, a humanoid, to gain advantage on ability check in dialogue and prevent it from attacking. This tells me that this is a wisdom save. Sometimes some of these will be like a charisma save or something of the sort. Like this one says, a wisdom dex save. So if someone cast fairy fire on me, I would do a dexterity saving throw. Usually I thought charm was a This is a Constitution save. So that's when you would use those specific, here we go, Charisma save. Bane is a Charisma save. So I would use my Charisma to see if I save against someone casting this spell against me. What's my Charisma? Let's go through that real fast. +3. Well, I rolled a 10. I get a +3 from this, but I've got a Charisma saving throw proficiency, +2 more. I'm now at 15. So that is how our proficiencies work. And the last two things I want to talk about are your cantrips and your spells. Cantrips are basically unique to every single class. You'll have a whole list of little abilities that you can kind of use, and it just depends on your class, your subclass, all of your kit. They're basically spells that everyone has to get access to. Maybe you've got a specific race that gives you, like dancing lights, for example. They'll always be in this cantrip section. Now, spells are going to be dependent upon, again, your class and your subclass. Access to them is going to be entirely different depending on what you're playing. But spells will be dependent too upon the individual spell level that you're trying to go for. Like these are all level 1 spells. And you choose them and you ready them up in this section up here. Again, depending upon if you're like a druid or a wizard or a sorcerer, the ability to ready those spells will come down to if you can or cannot. Meaning that do you just simply swap them out at every engagement, or do you only swap them out when you rest, or do you only swap them out when you level? Those are your 3 different types of swapping spells out as per dependent upon the class. But those are all the little details here about your cantrips, your spells, your proficiencies. The last thing I want to go into is your hit points. So your total hit points are determined by your class, Constitution modifier, and relevant racial traits. Hit points increase with every level you gain in your class. So what this means is you're going to look at our Constitution modifier. It's a +1. And what that means is we're going to add that +1 to our hit points. Every single class has a base amount of hit points, and it'll be plus their Constitution modifier. Majority of classes are a 8 plus that modifier, but then you get into stuff like Fighter, which is a 10. I think what's it called? A Paladin is a 10. There are rare instances where you are a 6, and there's rare instances where I think it's a Wizard's a 6 or something like that. Yeah, Wizards is a 6. And there's rare instances where your Barbarian has all the way up to 12. And remember, it all keys off of that Constitution modifier. So going back to Bard really quick, just to show you what this looks like. We have 8 is our base, +1 is from our Constitution. Well, let's reduce our Dexterity and put in this to make it a plus. Okay, we can't go any higher. Okay, I thought we were going to do a +3. But now, remember this said 9 because we had 8 base +1. Now we're at a +2 with our Constitution modifier. This makes it so that it is at a 10. Majority of classes are a 1d8 per level. So 8 is a pretty good average base. 6 is a little bit on the weaker side. And then 12 is, again, superhuman. Only one that's got that is the Barbarian. So that's how your max hit points per level are going to work. And it is worth just kind of noting how that works going forward. So pushing us into the actual game, I want to talk more about actions, because actions are going to color a lot of the things that you're going to be deciding upon in character creation. I think it's important you understand how they work initially. So every character, whenever they jump into combat or whenever they're doing things, they have actions, bonus actions, usually some sort of class action, like a class action lawsuit, like a bardic inspiration in this example. Then they have spell slots and cantrips. And I'm using a bard specifically to do this because they actually have spell slots. Everyone usually gets one bonus and one action and one bonus action. And there's different ways to manipulate those. I'm just trying to talk about things from a base standpoint. And when you hover over almost all of your abilities here, it'll tell you if it's an action or if it's a bonus action. And you can see just by moving how much of your movement you've got available, because you can only move a certain amount in a specific turn. So right there, 9 meters is our max. And if you look at the end turn gauge, as I drag this, you can see that little thing kind of filling and not filling up. A little bar. The blue is kind of turning to, I guess some more teal. I don't even know what you call that. But Those things are important because as you look and say, hey, you know what? This is going to grant you an additional action. If you've never played D&D, you might not know what that means. So I can actually click this button and it shows me what all my actions are. Hey, scroll revivify. It is an action. Or you know what? I'm going to use this weapon action. So on and so forth. So if I move here, let's just go ahead and move. Let's just, you know what? We'll just do like a weakening strike. We don't have a target. I think one of these has got like a, it doesn't have a target, unfortunately. But basically, you'd use an action. It would be your action for the turn. There, see, we've done it. And now we have our bonus action, which you can use. But it's worth noting that your bonus action is going to be something like a hide, it's a shove, it's a jump, it's a dip. It's not necessarily another attack unless you have the ability to get an extra attack through your level or what have you. I just don't want you to think that, oh, a bonus action, I'll just do the same thing I just did. That's not always the case. And some characters have different bonus actions. Like take the rogue, for example. I believe that they have a bonus action for dodge specifically. But with my bonus actions, by clicking this, I get to see, oh, my Bardic Inspiration is a bonus action, meaning I can take this outside of my primary action of attacking or what have you. I also have my 3 Bardic Inspiration dice. It shows me a little 3 right there. And I can use this and do my Bardic Inspirations. But my spell slots, too, are also part of this process because this Healing Word is a bonus action versus this Tasha's Hideous Laughter is an action. So even though it's going to use a bonus, or I'm sorry, let's just go to the bonus one. Even though this is going to use a bonus action, it's also going to use a level 1 spell slot. And as you can see, it's blinking. It's showing me what is going to be used right there. You can see that little glowing triangle, and you can see that little glowing square of the thing that is going to basically cost me to use this. And it's important to understand these, like I said, during character creations, as you understand how they actually play into your character. To here with cantrips. Cantrips typically are actions, but they can be bonus actions, just depending on the cantrip itself. And one last thing I do want to point out, and it's not actually related to actions and bonus actions per se, but it is how weapon proficiencies give you specific unlocks for items. So take a look at this rapier. Because we have proficiency in rapier, I get access to flourish, piercing strike, and weakening strike. Had I not had this, I would not have access to those actions or bonus actions, depending upon whatever they are. It's very important just to make these distinctions up front because you will want to know this when you are making your character. And at that, it brings our video here to a close. So hopefully now you have a better understanding of how these key concepts work. What's an ability check? What's an advantage? What's a disadvantage? All these things that really kind of play into one another. I didn't segregate things into their own little individual concepts like I sometimes do with these videos. I tried to show how they all bleed together because the game is so much more about understanding that your ability check leads into a skill which might have a proficiency bonus, which could also be at an advantage or a disadvantage. And it's an important thing to kind of see how these things push themselves together versus me giving you abstract singular explanations of every concept, because they are, like I said, so married together. If there's any questions you have about this, go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. I did not go into short rest and long rest because the game plays so much differently than the tabletop does, as far as rests being something that you can kind of just do all the time. Short rest would be something that would confer a smaller amount of health and a smaller amount of spells regained, versus a long rest, which is going to be more health, more abilities and spells regained every time you do it. But the concept there is just way different and more abstract in the video game than it is in actual tabletop. But as always, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.